Okay, so hello. I am actually glad that I am talking during lunchtime because now I know that everyone that's here is really interested in what I have to say because otherwise they would be eating. And actually my talk is a lot about food. We are going to learn how to cook with NativeScript-Vue. So first, who am I? I am Tiago, hello. I work at irc.com, which is a company that is making IRC great again. So we are bringing IRC, the old protocol, to the 21st century. And I work in the Kiwi IRC team, which Kiwi IRC is a modern client for IRC. We have a web version, and I am working on the mobile version. They are actually one of the sponsors for NativeScript-Vue, so I am in good company. And I am also a progress developer expert, which is kind of like a Google developer expert, but it's not, it's just progress. Yes, I joined that program because I started working with NativeScript and especially NativeScript-Vue. Okay, so what is NativeScript-Vue? What is a NativeScript-Vue app? So with NativeScript-Vue, we can write NativeScript apps, and I will explain more about that later. And I don't know if you can see, but it doesn't matter. This is like a NativeScript-Vue component, and it's like a normal Vue.js component. You have your template, your script, and your CSS. So everything should look quite familiar to a Vue.js developer. But what is NativeScript, and how does it compare with an hybrid or PWA app? So I'm not comparing apples to oranges. I am comparing apples to pears because they are quite more similar. So with NativeScript, we use JavaScript, XML, and CSS kind-ish. It's not exactly the same syntax that we find on the web. And NativeScript will grab your code and compile it and render it into native components. So while PWA is like a browser that's open and your app is like it's all rendered inside a browser with normal JavaScript and HTML. NativeScript will translate your code into native components. So the end result is an app that is much more integrated with the native operating system and into the native platform. Of course, there are some differences, and lots of people that try NativeScript are web developers, and sometimes they start working with NativeScript with the web developer mindset, and things don't work quite the same. So, for instance, there is no DOM, because we don't have a DOM, we only have native components. We don't have divs, we have layouts, and there are these 6 types of layouts that allow us to kind of arrange our components in the screen. They are quite different from positioning elements in an HTML page, but I think it's actually much easier. It's clearer what you are trying to do. It's easier to put components where you want them, and that's great. But they are not divs. So on a web page, we just add divs inside divs, and we cannot do that with layouts. But that's not a problem, because layouts are actually much more powerful. And also, there is no URL bar, there is no refresh button, so there is no routing. We can navigate between screens in our native app in a different way, directly with animations, etc., but it's not using routing as we find on a PWA. So How does NativeScript compare, for instance, with React Native? I think NativeScript has a big selling point, which is when you are developing an app in the NativeScript, most of the time you will be able to work just with what NativeScript offers. And so everything is fine. But there is always that point where you have to cut through the framework and reach the native API. And the NativeScript does this beautiful thing. It proxies all native APIs so that we can use the native APIs, the native components, directly from JavaScript. That means that we can go to the Android documentation or the iOS documentation to see how it works. But of course, what we all do, we just go to Stack Overflow and copy-paste some code. This is actually what I did in this example. NativeScript did not support text shadows, so I wanted to add some shadows in text. So what I did, I went to Stack Overflow and I searched how to add shadows in Android. And so I grabbed that code over there. As you can see, it's just 5 lines of code. And I translated it, and I am accessing native APIs directly from JavaScript. I don't have to go to Java, and I can do the same thing with iOS. So I can just go through the native APIs and just implement it from the JavaScript runtime, which is great. After that, I wrapped this code in a plugin, and I started playing with some shadows. Yeah, pretty cool. So when we mix Vue.js, I think Vue.js is a great match for NativeScript, because NativeScript has this cool property system. For instance, I don't think you can see there, but that is a component that has a class with a background color of blue. But with NativeScript, all CSS properties are translated to props in a component. So I can just write anything that I can do in CSS, I can just do it right in the component. But since we are on Vue.js, I can also make that property, that prop reactive. And so it's much easier to just manipulate the UI from using code and variables and Vue.js reactivity system. And so this allows me to create, more or less crazy stuff, but also serious stuff using this approach. So Vue.js and NativeScript is a very good match. But as I said, there are some differences between using Vue.js in the web or on NativeScript. So what can I use? What can I do with NativeScript and Vue.js? I will show you some examples, but I think from these examples you can get a feeling of what will work and what will not work. So Vuex, can we use it with NativeScript-Vue? Yes, we can. It's just the same. You include it just the same as you do with any Vue.js project. And it's great. It works fine. Vue router. Nope. Goodbye, broccoli. It doesn't work because NativeScript-Vue is not the same thing as a web app, so the routing system is very different. Actually, it was working at some point, but it was very hacked, and it was more problems than a solution. So there are other ways to navigate, which are actually better, so it's fine. This famous internationalization library, does it work? Yep, it works fine because it's just the JavaScript and uses Vue.js reactivity system. You can just import it, use your JSON files, everything works. Perfect, awesome. Vue transitions. This is a special component in Vue where you can create animations when a component shows or hides. And yes, you can use it with some gotchas, but I actually had this the demo that you can check out later with several transitions using several techniques. So all this works and it's fine. So finally, what does it feel like to develop with NativeScript-Vue in our day-to-day? Actually, I am developing 100% of my time using NativeScript-Vue. So things are actually much better now. Now we have live sync and hot module replacement. It's not reload, it's replacement. So that I can just type my code and save, and automatically it will reflect those changes on a simulator or on a real device that's connected to my computer. It works fine. Sidekick, this is like an app like Vue UI that Natalia showed in the previous talk. So you can manage your project using this visual UI and compile it, add plugins, etc. Also, there is a plugin market. So there are lots of things that the community builds for NativeScript, and if you need something that the framework doesn't support natively, probably someone already built a plugin for that. The playground is also awesome because it's like a code pen where you write your code and you hit preview and you can just scan a QR code and test it on your mobile phone directly, which is great also for sharing code. Those examples that I showed before, they are all playgrounds, so you can search them there. Also, there is the community Slack. NativeScript has a great community. It was what sucked me into the project in the first place. And if you have any problem, you can just pop up at the community Slack and ask around. Someone will answer you. And finally, there are also lots of resources. For instance, nativescripting.com. This is great for the visual learner. So if you like to learn with videos, this nativescripting.com has lots of courses so that you can learn NativeScript and also NativeScript-Vue. There is also this workshop. It's like an online workshop where you can follow several steps for building your application, and of course, Stack Overflow. It's easy. Sorry. Do not eat popcorn before your talk. Sorry. So sometimes I go to Stack Overflow to check if there is anything that I can answer, and usually there is not because someone already answered it. This is my sexy voice. So thank you very much. You can find me at these handlers on Twitter and on GitHub. And just before I go, I still have a small pitch. I am writing this book, Hands-on Native Mobile Development with NativeScript-Vue. So I am putting all my knowledge about how to build NativeScript-Vue apps into this book from the beginning, from design to implementing the UI to deployment. So if you are interested, it will be around sometime. I don't know. I hope. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope you learned something. I have time for questions, but if someone has, yeah, if someone has questions, or I will be around, so if anyone wants to talk about NativeScript or Vue, I am always up for it. Okay.